You ever notice how when people talk about getting away from it all, they never mention the things that are already out there? I'm asking because every time someone says they want to move to the country and live off the land, I have to bite my tongue not to tell them what happened to me in Louisiana. So, yeah, grab a drink, sit down, and I'll walk you through it. Just don't laugh when I get to the part with the diary. I didn't believe half of it either until I watched it come true. Name's Eli Cage, born and raised in Texas, blue collar all the way. I've done a bit of everything: construction, warehouse, pipeline, whatever paid the bills at the time. Right before all this happened, I was working in a metal fabrication shop outside Houston. Noise, heat, cheap coffee, overtime I could feel in my teeth. You know the type. Then I got the call. Some lawyer out of Lafayette tracked me down. A distant relative, a cousin of my old man's, had passed away and left me a property in his will. A farm out in rural Louisiana, 50-something acres, with a farmhouse, a little barn, some woods, and a lot of overgrown pasture. I'd met the guy once when I was a kid, but he was just that weird old cousin you saw at funerals and never thought about again. I thought it was a scam at first, but the paperwork checked out. There were property tax documents, photos, the deed, everything. I was the last living relative they could pin down, so the place was mine. You'd think I'd be suspicious, but honestly, I was tired. Tired of traffic, tired of neighbors screaming at each other through paper walls, tired of clocking in before sunrise and clocking out after dark. I'd been feeling this itch, like I needed to get out before something in me snapped. So, when the lawyer said, "Mr. Cage, you can sell it or you can move in. It's yours either way." That was it. Sell? Sure, rational move, but that itch in my chest whispered, you could just go. Go live somewhere quiet. Fix the place up. Hunt a little. Work with your hands. Maybe pick up some part-time job in town. The stupid romantic fantasy people post about online and regret 3 months later. I didn't even give myself time to overthink it. I packed my truck, gave my landlord notice, said goodbye to Houston, and drove east toward Louisiana, telling myself I was about to start a slower, simpler life. If nobody ever told you this before, let me be the first. When life suddenly hands you something that sounds too much like a horror movie setup, don't lean into it. It was late winter when I arrived, one of those southern winters where the air is cold but wet and the sky never stops looking like it's about to open up. Wind that smells like mud and rain, you know? The property was outside a small town about an hour from Lafayette. You turn off the highway, then off the paved road, then onto a dirt road that looks like it shouldn't support vehicles made after 1970. Cypress trees, ditches full of dark water, fields that had clearly given up on being fields. Then the farmhouse rose up out of that grey landscape. 2 stories, old and tired looking, but not quite falling down. Faded white paint, green shutters, wraparound porch with boards that moaned when I stepped on them. Off to the right was a barn slouching toward the tree line. Beyond that, a strip of pasture, then a wall of woods and swamp. It wasn't pretty in the real estate listing way, but it felt solid, like it had been there long before me and it would be there long after. I stepped out of the truck, cold wind smacking my face, and I swear to you, the first thought I had was, this is quiet. Not, oh, it's peaceful quiet. Not, what a nice day quiet. It was like the quiet had weight to it. No traffic, no neighbor's dog, no planes overhead, just wind, a crow somewhere far off, and the faint creak of trees rubbing against each other. I told myself I liked it. The lawyer had left the keys in a lockbox on the front door. I let myself in. The inside smelled like dust, old paper, and faintly of oil. Not cooking oil, the kind you use on machinery or guns. The furniture was old but well kept. Heavy wooden table in the kitchen, worn armchair in the living room, couch that had definitely seen better days. Upstairs, there were 2 bedrooms and what had been turned into a study. I peeked in and saw bookshelves lining the walls, a big old desk, stacks of papers and notebooks. I figured that's where the guy did his paperwork, or whatever farmers did when they weren't out in the fields. I didn't think much of it then. I spent the first few days just cleaning and fixing stuff, replacing bulbs, patching leaks, tightening drawer handles, that kind of thing. The kind of quiet, mindless work that feels good when you're sick of clocking in and out. And for a while, it was good. Boring, but good. I'd drive into town, get groceries, talk to the guy at the hardware store. Folks in town were friendly enough, in that careful small town way where they aren't sure about you yet. I mentioned I'd inherited the old browsered farm, and a couple people raised their eyebrows, but nobody said anything dramatic. That should have been my second warning. The first warning came at night. The wind started picking up a few days after I moved in. Forecast said storm system coming through, and they weren't kidding. That stormy winter weather hit like it had a grudge. Hard rain, wind slamming branches against the roof, thunder rolling so low it felt like it was under the house. It was the kind of night that makes you glad you've got a roof over your head and nowhere to be. I'd set up a little routine, made dinner, washed up, then settled into the living room armchair with a beer and an old hunting magazine I brought with me. I'd done some hunting back in Texas, nothing crazy, mostly deer and hogs, and I'd started thinking about getting a lay of the land here and maybe scouting for game later. The power flickered once around 9 but stayed on. The storm pounded the windows, the house creaked, and I tried not to think about how far I was from any help if something broke. Then, around 10, I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind. You know how sometimes the wind gets into just the right angle with a window frame or a chimney, and it almost sounds like a voice? It was like that, but deeper. A long drawn-out howl, rising and falling in a way that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Not a coyote, not a dog. I'd heard both 1,000 times. This sounded wrong. I muted the TV and just sat there, listening. The howl came again, closer this time. It wasn't a normal animal call. There was something almost shaped about it. like it was trying to twist itself into words and failing at the last second. I thought of wolves, but there aren't supposed to be wolves out here. I got up, grabbed the flashlight I'd left by the door, and stepped onto the porch. The storm hit me full in the face, cold rain, gusting wind that made the trees sway like they were trying to rip themselves out of the ground. The yard was a smear of dark shapes and reflective puddles. I swept the flashlight across the property. The driveway, the truck, the barn, the fields. Nothing. Just rain. Then the beam hit the tree line. For half a second, I thought I saw eyes, high off the ground, reflecting the light back in a dull yellow-green shimmer, too far apart for a deer, too high for a dog. I blinked, adjusted the light, and they were gone. Another howl cut through the storm, this time coming from deeper in the woods, off to the right. The sound slid under my skin and settled somewhere cold. My rational brain said, probably a big dog, maybe someone's stray, or a coyote with a cold whatever. The rest of me said, get inside, now. I listened to the rest of me. Inside I locked the door, deadbolt and all. I closed the curtains, turned up the TV to drown out the storm, and told myself I was being ridiculous. But I didn't sleep much that night. Next morning, the world looked washed out and hungover. The storm had passed, leaving the yard muddy and full of standing water. Branches were down, the ditch by the road had overflown. The sky was still thick with clouds, but the wind had died down. I made coffee, stepped onto the porch, and tried to convince myself the night before had been 50% weather, 50% imagination. I was halfway through my mug when I saw an old pickup truck roll down the road and pull into the driveway. The man who stepped out looked like he'd been carved out of cypress and sun. Mid-50s, lean, face lined, wearing a faded LSU cap and a flannel that had seen better decades. He gave me a nod like we'd already met. You must be Cage, he said, coming up the steps like he owned them. Name's Louis Boudreau. I live about a mile yonder. He jerked his thumb in the direction of the woods. Figured I'd come say hello, for the parish did. We shook hands. His grip was firm, dry and a little too long, like he was weighing me. You the one inherited this place? He asked. Yeah, just got in a few days ago. He glanced toward the tree line, jaw tightening just enough that I noticed. You heard it, didn't you? He asked quietly. My stomach did that unpleasant little drop. Heard what? He looked back at me, eyes squinting against the weak light. The howling, he said. Last night. I opened my mouth to say something dismissive, and what came out was, yeah, I heard something, thought it was, I don't know, coyote maybe? He didn't look convinced. You keep any animals here? No, just me, the dust, and a colony of spiders. He huffed a laugh at that. You hunt? He asked then, out of nowhere. Some, back in Texas, haven't had the chance to scout around here yet. Don't, he said. It was flat, no smile, no joking tone, just don't. Excuse me? You wanna hunt? Go out with somebody who knows the land. Don't go stomping around these woods by yourself, especially not at night. I felt a flicker of irritation. I'd been in the country my whole life, just not this state. I wasn't some city boy wandering into the swamp in flip-flops. I can handle myself, I said. Grew up in a small town. I know not to go charging into the dark like an idiot. For a second, he just stared at me like he was deciding whether I was worth the effort. Then he sighed. Look, he said, dropping his voice. Your cousin, Brozard, he didn't leave this place because he got tired of farming. He changed, you understand? Started sleeping in the day, up at night, talking about things in the cane, things in the tree line. Folks said he'd lost it, but some of us knew better. He leaned on the porch railing, eyes still fixed on the distant woods. You hear any stories growing up? He asked, down in Texas, about something they called the rougarou. I had. Not a lot, but enough. Hunting buddies telling campfire stories. Tales of a Cajun werewolf, cursed by breaking some Catholic rule, prowling the swamps and sugarcane fields. It hunted sinners, they said, or cursed them, or passed the curse on with a single bite or even a drop of its blood. I'd always filed it under fun local myth and moved on. Yeah, I said slowly, I've heard of it. Louis nodded once. Well, he said, out here we don't tell that one just for fun. After Louis left, after he'd given me a list of local contacts, warned me not to go into the woods after dark, and told me to keep your doors locked and your soul clean, I tried to shake it off. Rougarou, ghost stories, old farmers getting weird in their old age. Easy enough explanation. But his words stuck in my head like a splinter, especially when I walked past the study upstairs and saw the door half open. I hadn't really gone through that room yet. I peeked, sure, but most of my effort had gone into the kitchen, the bedrooms, fixing up the bathroom. The study had been the dead cousin's domain, and something about rummaging through it felt intrusive. That day, curiosity trumped manners. I opened the door and stepped in. The room was bigger than it looked from the hall. Shelves full of books lined the walls, some about farming, some about Louisiana history, some that looked a lot older and less normal. There were binders, notebooks stacked in piles, maps pinned to a corkboard with pushpins in different colors. On the big wooden desk sat a green-shaded lamp, an ashtray with a petrified cigar, and a stack of what looked like journals. Notebooks, 8 of them, maybe 10, arranged in a neat pile. One sat slightly off-center, like it had been put down last and never touched again. That was the one I picked up. The cover was plain, dark brown, worn soft at the corners. Inside, the handwriting was sharp, cramped, all in black ink, dates written at the top of each entry. The first date I saw was from about 12 years ago. I wasn't going to read much, just skim, I told myself. See what kind of man I'd ended up inheriting from. The first entry I landed on. March 3rd. Wind strong tonight. Heard it again by the cane. Not the dogs, not coyotes. It's him. Third night in a row he's come this close. Tried the old prayers, tried the salt and iron by the door. Voice in the wind kept saying my name. Sounded like my own father calling me in from the fields. Didn't answer. Won't answer. That's rule 1. I felt my mouth go dry. Rule 1? I flipped forward a few pages. March 9th. If anyone's reading this after I am gone, listen to me. Don't treat this like a story. There are rules to living here. I wrote them once in the front of the book, but the ink smeared in the rain, so I'm writing them again. Rules for the farm. 1. Never open the door after midnight if something outside calls your name. 2. Never step past the porch when the howling starts. 3. Do not leave meat hanging outside overnight. 4. If you hear it circling the house, do not look out the windows. Cover the mirrors and glass. 5. If you see it in the fields, do not run toward the road. It likes to chase. Go to the barn instead. 6. If blood lands on you, his or yours, do not let it dry on your skin. Wash it off with salt water and prayer. I don't know if the last owner wrote rules. No one warned me. Maybe this is me trying to do better for whoever comes next. I stood there, journal in hand, hearing the wind whisper through the old window frame. You ever feel reality tilt a little? Like, on one side, you've got the world, where all this is just the ramblings of a lonely old farmer losing his mind. On the other side, you've got the possibility that he was telling the truth, and you're standing on the fence. That's how it felt. I kept reading. The entries went on like that. Some were routine stuff: weather, crop notes, complaints about the price of feed, arguments with the bank. Then here and there, like rot under fresh paint, were the other notes: the howling, the shape in the field, the nights he couldn't sleep because he was pacing the tree line. He called it him at first. Later the word rougarou started showing up. He described it once, months into the journal. July 11th. Saw him proper last night. Moon was high, sky clear. He stood at the edge of the cane, tall as a man, maybe taller. Shoulders like a bull, head like a wolf, but wrong somehow. The snout too long, the eyes not animal, red but not glowing, like coals that have been banked. He walked on 2 legs, then dropped on 4 and ran like no dog I've ever seen. I know the stories. I know what they say he is: a cursed man, a sinner, a breaker of length. But there's nothing left of a man in those eyes, just hunger and something older than this land. That night I checked the time on my phone, 4:30 in the afternoon. I had hours before dark. I should have put the book down, should have gone to town, gotten a drink, watched a game in some bar with neon lights and noise and people who didn't believe in anything but tips and last call. But I didn't. I read until the light outside started to go grey. By the time I looked up, the storm clouds were rolling in again, piling on top of each other in a bruised sky. The forecast had said scattered storms. Out here that meant hope your roof holds. I went downstairs, turned on some lights, made myself dinner, turned the TV on to drown out the silence. But even over the low murmur of the television, I kept thinking I heard things. A creak on the porch, a scrape on the siding, faint, almost imagined. By then, the rain was coming down hard. The wind howled around the house, pressing against the windows, making them shudder. Thunder rattled the cabinet doors, and somewhere in all that, I heard that howl again. This time, there was no mistaking it. It came from the left side of the house, out by the overgrown field, long drawn out, starting low and climbing up into something that made my teeth ache. Every instinct in me screamed, "Do not go outside." So I didn't. To my credit, I didn't. I turned the TV down and sat there, heart beating too fast, listening. The howl came again, closer. Then, this is the part I hate admitting, I heard something else. I heard someone call my name. Eli. Clear as day. A man's voice, kind of muffled by the storm but unmistakable. Somewhere between the porch and the yard, like someone was standing near the front steps. I froze. It called again. "Eli, you in there? Come on, boy, open up." The voice sounded familiar in a way that made no sense, like some old relative or neighbor from when I was a kid. My brain scrambled to put a face to it, and couldn't. I got halfway to the door before the words from the journal flashed in my mind. Never open the door after midnight if something outside calls your name. My eyes shot to the digital clock on the cable box. 12:03 a.m. I stopped so fast I nearly slipped on the old rug. "Eli, come on now, you hear me?" The voice again, a little sharper. "Ain't right to leave a man standing in the rain." I stood there in the dim light of the living room, every nerve jangling. "Who's there?" I called, hating the way my voice shook. No answer, just the wind, the rain hammering the porch, and the faint creak of a board as if someone had stepped on it. The voice came again, closer. This time it sounded exactly like my father. Except my father had been dead for 7 years. Eli. That single word nearly broke me. It was his tone, his cadence, the way he used to say my name when I was in trouble, but he wasn't angry yet, just disappointed. I stared at the door, feeling something like gravity pulling me forward. All I had to do was turn the deadbolt, open it, step out. That was it. Simple. My hand lifted toward the knob. Then some stubborn, pissed off part of me snapped awake. "No," I said out loud. "Screw you." I backed away from the door until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. For a long, long moment, there was nothing. Then, just outside the thin wooden barrier, that was my front door, something scraped lightly across it. Fingernails, claws, something caught between the two. Slow, deliberate drags from top to bottom, like it was tracing the door frame, getting a feel for it. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I did something stupid. I went outside. In my defense, staying cooped up in that house while my imagination ran wild wasn't doing me any favors. The storm had moved on, leaving everything soaked but quiet. The sky was a flat grey, no sun to speak of, just a general gloom that seemed to seep into the bones of the place. I ate a late breakfast, drank some coffee, and told myself I was going to do something normal, something ordinary. I was going to walk the property in daylight and prove to myself that it was still just land. Dirt, grass, timber, not some cursed playground for whatever had been yelling my name in the night. I grabbed my jacket, my boots, and, because I'm not completely stupid, my rifle. It was a 30-06 I'd brought from Texas. Good, reliable. I checked the chamber, safety on, and slung it over my shoulder. The ground squelched under my boots as I stepped off the porch, mud sucking lightly at the soles. The air smelled like wet earth and something faintly metallic. I started with the front yard, then circled around the side toward the field. Out by the tree line, the grass was flattened, not by wind, by weight. A wide path of bent broken stalks leading to the edge of the woods. Something big had paced there, back and forth. I followed the trail, slower now, every sense hyper-aware. That's when I saw the deer. It was lying just inside the tree line, half hidden by underbrush. A doe, or what was left of it. Its body was torn open from neck to belly, ribs cracked, organs gone, like something had taken out the insides with surgical rage. The head was twisted at an unnatural angle, eyes cloudy, tongue lolling. But what made my stomach turn wasn't the gore. I've hunted, I've cleaned game, I can handle blood. What got me were the teeth marks. They weren't like anything I'd seen from coyotes or feral dogs. The bites were deep, almost perfectly spaced, like a row of knives driven in with incredible pressure. Some were too far apart for a normal jaw. And there was no sign of typical feeding patterns. No scattered fur, no torn chunks nearby, just opened, hollowed out, left. Like it had killed for reasons that had nothing to do with hunger. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I backed away slowly, keeping the rifle at the ready, ears straining for any sound besides the drip of water from the trees. Nothing moved. I made it back to the farmhouse without incident, but my brain was buzzing. Deer get taken down by predators all the time, but this didn't feel right. I cleaned my boots on the porch, went inside and washed my hands, even though I hadn't touched the thing. Then I went back upstairs to the study and picked up the journal again. I started flipping pages like a man looking for his name in a list of the dead. I didn't have to go far. October 2nd, found another deer at the edge of the trees. Same as the others. Ripped open, organs gone, blood everywhere, but not like feeding, more like marking. There were prints this time, not quite wolf, not quite man, both. I know what they say about the rougarou, that it hunts sinners, that it only comes for those who break Lent or betray their church or wrong their families. But that's not true, or not the whole truth. He hunts where the land is weak and the air is thin, where the old ways were practiced and then abandoned. He hunts where no one remembers the rules. I shut the book so fast, dust puffed out of it. I remembered the flattened grass, the torn deer, The howling, the voice at the door. I remembered Louis's face, lined and serious. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I thought I might actually be in trouble. I did what any self-respecting modern man does when confronted with something he doesn't understand. I drove into town and found a bar. It was a low-ceilinged place with wood-paneled walls and a jukebox that only played songs from before 2005. A few locals sat at the counter, nursing beers and trading weather complaints. I found Louis in a corner booth, drinking something clear out of a short glass. He looked up when I approached, studied my face for a moment, and signed like he'd been hoping he wouldn't see me this soon. "You seen him?" he said, not a question. "Not him," I said, "but I saw what he did." I slid into the booth across from him. "Torn up deer at the edge of the trees," I said. "Too clean to be just a coyote. And last night, it called my name, sounded like my old man. Door after midnight, the whole 9 yards." He closed his eyes briefly, rubbing a hand over his stubble. "Did you open it?" "No." "Good." He knocked back the rest of his drink and set the glass down with a soft thud. "Then you're already ahead of Brossard." "What happened to him?" I asked. He hesitated, glancing toward the bar. The TV in the corner was playing some sports rerun no one was watching. The bartender pretended not to listen. Louis lowered his voice. "He started breaking the rules," he said. "At first he didn't know 'em. Nobody told him, same as you. Then he learned the hard way, saw things in the field, heard voices, found bodies of animals torn up like you just described. People in town told him stories, same as I'm telling you. Gave him some guidelines. He wrote the rest down himself, in that little book of his." My skin crawled. "I found it." "Good," Louis said. "Then you know more than most." "Why didn't anyone warn me?" I asked, anger sparking through the fear. "If this place is that bad, why not bulldoze the house and salt the earth?" He gave me a tired smile. "'Cause it don't work like that, son," he said. "You can't bulldoze a curse. Can't salt away something that was here before your granddaddy's granddaddy ever breathed. All you can do is live with it without feeding it, or move away and let it find someone else." I swallowed. "I don't really have anywhere to move away to," I admitted. "Not without starting from scratch again. I sank what I had into making this place livable. If I walk away now, I've got a truck, some tools, and not much else." Louis studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then," he said. "If you're staying, you're not staying stupid. You got that rifle still?" "Yeah." "You comfortable using it?" "Yeah." "Good. You might not be able to kill what's out there with it, but you can definitely make it think twice. And if it don't think twice, you can at least put a hole in anything that's working for it." I blinked. "Working for it?" "Animals, people," he shrugged. "Some folks out in the sticks got old ideas. Some of them think making deals with monsters buys them safety. They forget the part where monsters don't keep promises." I closed my eyes briefly. The world had been so simple a week ago. Louis tapped the table with one thick finger. "You got a phone signal out there?" he asked. "Yeah, spotty, but it works." "Good. You text me if you see anything, hear anything, feel anything. I'm too old to be running around playing hero, but I ain't gonna leave you alone out there neither. Silence stretched between us. Why? I finally asked. You barely know me. He looked away, jaw clenching. Had a cousin, he said, years back. Got taken by something that howled in the swamp behind our place. We weren't close. I didn't like him much. But I remember my mama crying when they found what was left. I remember wishing somebody had told us what to look out for. He looked back at me, eyes hard. Consider this me making up for that. The second encounter wasn't like the first. The first felt like a test, a poke at my defenses. Let's see what you do. The second felt like a siege. It was about a week later. The storms had been rolling through, off and on, the temperature hovering low enough that the rain felt icy when it hit your face. The sky hadn't really cleared since I'd gotten to the farm, just shifted shades of grey. I'd fallen into a routine that felt half normal, half insane. By day, I worked, fixing fences, clearing dead branches, patching the barn roof. I explored a little, but never too close to the tree line, always with my rifle, always keeping one eye on the shadows between the trees. By night, I followed the rules. Doors locked before sunset, curtains drawn, phone charged, a rifle loaded, leaning in the corner by my chair. I kept a bowl of salt water near the sink, like the journal suggested, and a little can of Morton's by each door. I still felt ridiculous, but less ridiculous than I'd feel if I ignored it and ended up dead. The night it happened, the wind was almost calm. Rain spit on and off against the windows, nothing like the earlier storms. I almost let my guard down, even watched a movie, let myself laugh once or twice. Then, around 11, the TV flickered. Just a little glitch, static for a second. I frowned, tapped the side of the screen like that ever actually helps. It steadied. Then, I heard the first footstep on the porch. Not the creak of the house settling, a real solid step, wood complaining under actual weight. My heart thumped once, hard. I muted the TV. Another step, slow, deliberate, like whoever or whatever it was had all the time in the world. The old boards creaked in a line, moving from one side of the porch to the other. Whoever was out there was circling the house. I stayed very still in my chair, breathing shallowly. The journal's words flashed in my head. If you hear it circling the house, do not look out the windows. Cover the mirrors and glass. I hadn't covered the windows. I pulled the curtains, sure, but that was more habit than ritual. Now every scrap of fabric felt paper thin. The steps reached the far corner of the porch, paused, then moved along the next wall. Something scraped lightly against the siding. Nails? Claws? I didn't know. The sound was soft, almost playful. Tap, drag, tap, drag. My skin crawled. I slid carefully off the chair, keeping low, and reached for the rifle in the corner. My fingers closed around the stock, feeling the familiar solid weight as a tiny island of comfort. I didn't turn on my lights. The footsteps kept going. The thing my mind had finally given up pretending it was a person completed a full circuit of the house, then started again. Lap 2. The second time it passed the front door. It knocked. 3 gentle taps, like a polite visitor. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mind scrambled for explanations. Some local playing a prank, some drunk who'd gotten turned around in the dark. But no drunk I'd ever met walked in a perfect circle around the house, scraping claws along the siding and knocking with inhuman patience. Eli, the voice again, right outside the door. It sounded different this time, not like my father, not like anyone I knew. It sounded like a bad imitation of human speech, like someone who'd heard people talking from very far away and was trying to copy them without understanding the meaning. Eli, open the door. I swallowed, throat dry, and forced myself to speak. Go to hell, I said, voice low. You've got the wrong house. The thing on the porch laughed. That's the part that still wakes me up sometimes. It was a broken noise, too low at first, then too high, like someone messing with pitch on a recording. No rhythm, just spray of ugly sound. Then the footsteps continued, third lap, fourth. I crouched by the armchair, back to the wall, rifle across my knees, listening to that steady pacing. At some point, I realized my phone was buzzing in my pocket. I pulled it out carefully and glanced at the screen. Louis Boudreau, one new message. My hands were shaking as I opened it. You home? I typed back with my thumb. Yeah, it's here, circling. His reply came almost immediately. You got curtains closed? Yeah. Don't look. Don't shoot unless it comes in. I'm on my way. I stared at the last line. How long? No answer. Outside the footsteps stopped. Silence. You think that would be better, right? It wasn't. I held my breath, straining to hear. Something shifted near the back wall. A faint rhythmic thud. It took me a second to place it. It was breathing. Something huge stood just outside, inhaling and exhaling slow, fogging the glass on the other side of the curtain. The curtain moved slightly with each breath. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. The breathing stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, with a crack like a gunshot, claws raked down the wall, ripping through paint and wood. The sound went through me like a physical thing. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut. Then it ran. I didn't see it. I felt it in the vibrations under my feet, the rapid thump of weight hitting the porch, the slam of something huge against the front steps, the heavy pace as it circled the house, faster, claws clattering against the boards. It was excited. Eli! The voice was louder now, closer to something human but still wrong. Words stretched, vowels twisted. It sounded like it was right up against the window next to me, separated from my head by just wood, insulation, and old glass. I pressed my back harder into the wall. That's when the back door shook. Once, twice, then harder. The old wood frame rattled in its hinges. I realized with a jolt of pure panic that the back door didn't have a deadbolt yet. I meant to install it. The lock on it was older, weaker. The shaking turned into a full-on assault. The door shuddered, wood splintered somewhere. I made a decision. Rules or no rules, I was going to sit there on my knees and calmly wait to see if the thing outside could bash its way in. I got up into a crouch, staying away from the windows, and moved down the hallway toward the kitchen, rifle ready. The back door shuddered again, a crack appearing by the latch. I braced myself against the corner where the hallway opened into the kitchen, angling so I had a clear line of fire on the door, but wasn't right in front of it. My pulse pounded in my ears. The door bowed inward, with the next hit the frame groaning. A patch of darkness showed where the wood had split. For a heartbeat, through that gap, I saw an eye. It was larger than any dog's, too forward-facing to be anything but predatory. The iris was a murky amber red, the pupil a vertical slit. It fixed on me with a focus that made my stomach twist. Then the claws tore across the gap, widening it, and I saw just for an instant a flash of teeth, long, too long, yellow-white, and wet. I fired. The rifle kick slammed into my shoulder, the muzzle flash lighting up the kitchen in a brief, violent strobe. The shot punched through the broken section of the door. The thing outside let out a sound that wasn't human, wasn't animal, wasn't anything I'd ever heard in a hunting ground. A screeching bellow that made my vision go white around the edges. The door frame exploded inward as something enormous slammed against it one last time, then recoiled. I heard heavy, uneven steps in the mud outside. Then the footsteps broke into a run, retreating around the corner, across the porch. Then, silence again. My ears rang, my shoulder throbbed. The smell of gunpowder mixed with old wood and damp air. I stood there, panting, rifle still raised, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. Instead, I heard an engine in the distance. Headlights swept across the front windows. A truck slowed in the driveway. The engine cut. "Eli," Louis' voice this time. "Real human. Don't shoot, you hear? It's me." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, and sagged against the wall, knees suddenly weak. Louis came in through the front, moving fast for a man his age. He took one look at the back door and whistled low. "Damn," he said, "you weren't kidding." The door looked like it had been through a war. The bottom half was splintered, the latch shattered. There were deep gouges on the outside where claws had dug in, and a dark smear on the wood where my bullet had gone through. "What did you hit?" he asked. "No idea," I said. My voice sounded far away. "Shot through the gap. I saw its eye, its teeth. Think I hit the shoulder area. Maybe." Louis stepped closer, leaning in to peer through the torn-out section, careful not to touch the darker streaks. "Get me a bowl," he said, "and some salt." I blinked at him. "What?" "You heard me," he said, turning his head just enough to glare at me. "Salt, bowl, now, move." Adrenaline got my legs working. I found a mixing bowl in the cabinet and the can of salt on the counter. He took both, poured a generous amount of salt into the bowl, then nodded toward the bathroom. "Water." I let the tap run until it was cold and filled the bowl. The salt sank to the bottom in a cloudy swirl. Louis dipped 2 fingers into the mixture and then flicked it onto the broken wood, muttering something under his breath. I caught a couple of "Our Fathers" and "Deliver us from evil" in there, but the rest was a low, Cajun French mumble. He might as well have been reciting a grocery list. His tone was that matter of fact. When he was done with the door, he turned back to me. "You got any on you?" he asked. "Any what?" "Blood." I looked down. There were small droplets on my forearm. I hadn't even noticed them. They'd sprayed when I fired, or when the thing hit the door. I didn't know if it was mine or his. Louis swore softly. Bathroom now, don't let it dry. I didn't argue. My skin crawled at the idea of that blood soaking in, doing whatever the journal hinted at. In the bathroom, Louis turned on the tap and dumped some of the salt water into the sink. Wash up with that, he said. Arms, hands, whatever got it hit. Don't get it in your eyes. The salt stung like hell in every small scratch and cut, but I scrubbed until my skin was red. You wanna tell me what exactly we're preventing here? I asked through clenched teeth. The curse, he simply said. You let his blood sit on you. You start hearing him in your head, seeing him in your sleep. That's how it spreads. That's how a man turns. Turns? He met my gaze in the mirror. Rougarou ain't just a monster, he said. It's a condition, a state. Sometimes passed down, sometimes given, sometimes caught. Folks argue over the details, but one thing's sure. His blood on you ain't a good thing. I swallowed hard. You could have led with that, I muttered. Would you have taken it any more serious than you are now? He asked. No, I admitted. He shrugged. Then we are right on schedule. We went back to the kitchen. The house felt different, like the air pressure had changed. Heavy, listening. You said it was circling, Louis asked, checking the locks, peeking through the damaged door carefully. Yeah, I said, around and around, knocked, called my name again, then went for the back. Did it sound like anyone you knew? First time it sounded like my dad. Tonight it sounded more like nothing, just wrong. He nodded. That's how it gets you. First, it uses love, then fear, then curiosity. Any door, till open. You responded? I told him to go to hell. His mouth twitched. Not what I would have said, but it will do. We spent the next half hour reinforcing the back door as best as we could in the middle of the night. Louis had brought some boards and long screws in the back of his truck, like he'd already expected this. We nailed heavy planks across the broken section, sealed the gaps as much as we could, then sprinkled more salt along the threshold. Salt stops it? I asked. Not outright, he said. It don't like crossing it though. Burns, they say. The old folks in my family put it across thresholds, windowsills, like a line in the sand. Most monsters respect a line if enough people believe in it. And if it doesn't? He glanced at me, eyes tired. Then you hope your aim's good and your prayers are better. We didn't sleep that night. We camped in the living room, both of us armed, the rifle leaning against my chair, a shotgun resting easy in Louis's hands. Outside, the wind picked up again. Rain pattered on the roof, but the circling footsteps didn't come back. Around 3 in the morning, with the worst of the adrenaline gone, exhaustion started to creep in. My eyes burned, my muscles ached. Louis sat straighter suddenly, as if a thought had just struck him. You read much of that journal? He asked. Bits and pieces, I said. The rules, some of the accounts. Why? You see anything about the barn? I frowned, thinking back. There was something about going there instead of the road if it shows up in the fields, I said. Said it likes to chase if you run to the road. He nodded. Did he mention What's in the loft? I shook my head. Not that I saw. He sighed. Browser wasn't completely stupid, he said. Crazy, maybe, but not stupid. His granddaddy dealt with this thing too. They didn't kill it, no one really does, but they hurt it enough it stayed away for a while. He wrote down what worked for him. I'm guessing that's what's up in that loft. And you didn't tell me this earlier because I didn't expect it to take such an interest in you so quick, he snapped. I thought you had a few weeks before it started circling. He likes to watch a man first, learn him. Great, I muttered. So I'm ahead of schedule. He ignored that. When the sun's up, he said, we're going to that barn. You're gonna get whatever browser left. Then we're gonna give our friend out there a reason to think twice before he comes knocking again. The idea of deliberately messing with something that had just tried to smash its way into my home did not thrill me. But the thought of just sitting there night after night, waiting for it to escalate again, that felt worse. Okay, I said, what's the plan? He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Rougarou don't like certain things, he said. Fire, iron, prayer, certain symbols, old saints. I don't mean the pretty little crosses folks hang in their car. I mean working tools, things that have seen blood, sweat. You combine enough of them, you can make a place real uncomfortable for him. Like a repellent? He shrugged. More like barbed wire. He can push through it if he wants, but he's gonna pay for it. You think that's what's in the barn? I think Browsert tried stuff, he said. Maybe he kept the failures and the successes both, so nobody had to reinvent the wheel. Shame he didn't leave a note on the front door for you. I thought of the first night, the voice, the urge to open the door. Yeah, I said bitterly. Real shame. We sat there in silence until the sky outside the curtains began to lighten from black to dark gray. When the first real hint of daylight showed, we got up, stiff and sore. You sure about this? Louis asked at the back door, hand on the makeshift barricade. No, I said honestly, but I'm not sure about sitting here and waiting either. Good enough. We stepped outside. The yard looked worse than it had after the first storm. Deep gouges marked the ground near the back steps, like something had dug in hard for traction. The boards of the porch were scratched and splintered. The repair door had fresh cracks in it, the wood bruised around the new screws. On the far side of the house, the siding bore long, ugly claw marks, some deep enough to cut through to whatever was under the old paint. Damn, I said softly. Keep moving, Louis said. Don't give him the satisfaction. We crossed the yard toward the barn. It loomed larger up close, red paint peeling, big double doors hanging slightly crooked, the roof patched in places where someone had tried to stave off collapse. Inside, it smelled like dust, old hay and faintly of oil. Morning light filtered through gaps in the boards, stripping the interior with slashes of pale gold. Used to keep animals in here, Louis said, voice echoing softly. Browsert stopped a few years before he went. Why? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. They were too tempting a target, he said. He got tired of finding what you found with that deer, or worse. A wooden ladder led up to the loft, It creaked when Louis put his foot on the first rung. "You armed?" he said without looking back. I patted the rifle strap on my shoulder. "Yeah." "Good. If anything up there moves that ain't me, you shoot it." Comforting. We climbed. The loft was darker, beams thick with cobwebs. Old bales of hay were stacked haphazardly, some fallen apart, straw spilling across the rough wooden floor. In the back corner, away from the gaps of light, was a trunk. It was old, metal bound, the latch slightly rusted but still intact. Someone had carved a crude cross into the lid. "Well," Louis said, "that screams helpful or cursed, or both." "Want me to open it?" I asked. "Oh, hell no," he said. "You're the legal owner of all this mess. That honor's yours." "Thanks," I muttered. I knelt, my knees protesting on the hard boards, and ran my fingers over the latch. There was a thin line of dried wax sealing it. I scraped it off carefully. "You sure there's not like a bomb in here?" I asked. "If there is, it's older than both of us," Louis said. "And the Rougarous problem, too." Not reassuring. I flipped the latch and lifted the lid. Inside it was organized in that careful, obsessive way of someone who expects to need every item in a hurry. There were iron nails, thick and hand-forged, wrapped in cloth, small bottles labeled in a tight script, holy water, blessed oil, graveyard dirt, from which graveyard I did not ask, a short, heavy iron chain with little crosses welded into it at intervals, a smaller box full of carved wooden medallions with saint images burnt or etched into them. And underneath all that, more notebooks. Not journals this time, more like manuals. Louis whistled softly. "Browsert, you paranoid bastard," he said with something almost like admiration. "You actually did your homework." I picked up the top notebook. On the first page, in the same cramped handwriting as the journal, were the words, "For whoever comes after me." This place is not safe. It never was. If you're still here, it means you either can't leave or you're too stubborn to. Either way, know this. You cannot kill the Rougarou, not truly, but you can hurt him. You can drive him off. You can make your home a place he does not like to come near. The things in this box work. I know, because I bled to prove it. I flipped the page. Things that worked. Iron nails over doors and windows. Blessed if you can find a priest who still believes. Holy water on thresholds. Saint medals buried at the corners of the house and property line. Saint Michael, Saint Hubert, Saint Christopher. Fire. He hates fire. Prayer with conviction. Not the words, the fate. Things that don't. Salt alone. It slows him, burns a little, but he'll push through if he's mad enough. Running for the road. He likes the chase. Bargaining. Do not offer him deals. He is a lie dressed in fur. That tracks, Louis said, peering over my shoulder. Hubert's a good call. Patron saint of hunters. Michael's a fighter. Christopher for traveling. Old man wasn't stupid. You said that already, I said. Well, I didn't say he was smart enough to leave, Louis said, but he had his moments. We spent the next hour hauling that trunk down the ladder, carefully, with a fair bit of swearing and bringing its contents back to the house. It felt better having something to do. We hammered iron nails above the doors and windows, each driving blow echoing through the old wood. We sprinkled holy water along the thresholds, muttered half-remembered prayers. We went out to the corners of the house and buried medallions, small little coins of saints, at each one marking the boundaries of the building with a quiet piety neither of us really talked about. As we worked, Louis explained, in that practical way of his, Rougarrou's old Catholic, he said. Old world mixed with old swamp. The stories say breaking Lent is what makes you one, or being cursed by a priest. I don't know how much of that's literal, but he don't like reminders. Holy things. Iron ain't religious, but it's grounding. It says this is human space, built by human hands. Monsters don't like being reminded the world moved on without them. And the fire? That's just common sense, he said. Everything bleeds, everything burns. We didn't finish until late afternoon. My arms ached, my shoulders were tight, my brain felt stretched thin. Louis stepped back from the front door, looking at the nails glinting faintly above it, the faint damp sheen of holy water on the threshold, the faint disturbance where we'd buried the medallions. You won't keep him away forever, he said, but tonight you might sleep. I wanted to believe that. Where will you be? I asked. If he comes back. He jerked his head toward the woods. My place, he said. I'm gonna set up a little surprise for him, between my property and yours. If he decides to take the long way around, I want him hitting something unpleasant. Like what? I asked. He smiled grimly. You don't want the details, he said. You just want to know. It will hurt it. Fair enough. I wish I could tell you that all that prep worked so perfectly we never saw the Rougarou again. I can't. What I can tell you is this. It changed the way he came. That night the air felt thicker than usual. The wind was mostly still, but the clouds hung low and heavy, pressing down on everything. The world outside the windows looked smudged, like someone had erased the edges with a dirty thumb. I went through my new routine, upgraded version. Doors locked, iron nails checked, curtains shut tight, rifle cleaned, loaded within easy reach. A small fire crackling in the wood stove, not for heat, but for the principle of the thing. The house felt different, not safe exactly, but claimed, mine. I ate, washed up, tried to read something that wasn't a cursed farmer's manual. It didn't take. My eyes slid over the words, but my brain was replaying every sound from the previous night. Around 10, my phone buzzed. A text from Louis. At my place, everything quiet so far. If you hear anything, text me. Don't be a hero. I snorted softly. Too late for that, I muttered. The hours dragged. At 11, the first howl came. It was farther away this time, not at the tree line of my property, but somewhere deeper in the swamp, off to the east. The sound carried through the damp air, long and mournful. The fire popped. The house creaked. I sat very still, every muscle tight, listening. Another howl answered. This one, I realized with a chill I didn't think I had left in me, sounded smaller, higher pitched, shorter. Oh, come on, I whispered. There's more than one? I picked my phone. You hear that? This time Louis's answer was slower. Yeah, he's calling. Pack's close. I stared at that. Pack? You think a curse only ever lands on one man at a time? Stay inside. Another howl. Closer now. The hairs on my arms stood up. The next noise wasn't a howl. It was a scream. Human, male, somewhere off to the west, near where Louis said his property started. I shot to my feet. My finger hovered over his contact icon. Before I could hit dial, another text came through. That's me. Don't panic. Well, that didn't help. I typed, You okay? Got one in a trap. He ain't happy. Stay put. If they come your way, I'll let you know. I stared at that last line. If. As if on cue, something moved out in the dark. I didn't see it, I felt it. The way you feel someone staring at you across a room. The sense of attention, focus. Then came the footsteps, not circling this time. Straight. Something heavy moved through the field, mud sucking at its feet, weeds swishing. Slow, confident strides. It stopped somewhere out front, beyond the porch, maybe 20, 30 yards from the house. Eli. The voice was different again, deeper than the last time, with a faint wet gurgle under some of the letters, like the speaker's mouth was full of teeth that didn't belong. I didn't answer. It spoke again, the words slurred but understandable. You hurt me. I swallowed hard. I'll do it again, I called before I could stop myself. You come through that door, I'll put another round in you. Silence. Then it laughed. Not the glitchy, broken sound from before. This laugh was worse, because it was closer to human, like a man mocking someone weaker. You hide, it said. Little man, little cage. The way it said my name made my skin crawl. Something scratched lightly at the air, claws flexing maybe. Come, it said. Come see. Come, run. I didn't move. From somewhere behind the house, closer this time, a second set of footsteps joined the first, then a third off to the side. They weren't circling yet, just positioning. The mental image of wolves flanking prey popped into my head. I turned off the last lamp, leaving the room lit only by the glow from the wood stove. The house plunged into a softer, flickering darkness. My phone buzzed. They pulled loose. On their way. You hear more than one? Yeah, 3 at least. Then you follow the rules. You see 'em at the window, you don't look. You hear 'em at the door, you don't open. If they breach, you shoot center mass and then shoot again. Aim for the joints, they don't like limp. Helpful as ever, I muttered. The first impact came at the side of the house. Not a full-on hit like before, more like a test. A shoulder rammed into wood, hard enough to rattle the frames. A low, rumbling growl bled through the wall, then another hit from the opposite side. They were gauging the structure. Something scraped along the front window, claws tapping on old glass. The sound set my teeth on edge. I stepped back from the wall, rifle up. Every breath counted. The howling started again. Not a single voice now, but several, rising and falling into a horrible chorus. Some high, some low, some breaking halfway through, like the throat making them wasn't built for that sound. It didn't feel like a warning howl, it felt like a celebration, like they'd cornered something and were gearing up for the final play. My mind skittered back to the journal, to the list of what didn't work. Running for the road, bargaining, sold alone. I wasn't stupid enough to try the first two. I wasn't confident enough in the third. Think, I whispered to myself. Come on, Eli. Think. Use your damn head. I had a rifle and ammo, a house with iron and holy water and saint medals reinforcing it, a barn with more tools and probably more old tricks, a neighbor somewhere out there wrestling with things that wanted me dead. I thought about the fire in the wood stove. I thought about what Louis had said. Everything burns. The next impact on the back door was harder. The new boards groaned. A nail squealed as it was forced partly loose. Okay, I said to the empty room. New rule. We don't wait for the wolf to huff and puff. I grabbed a heavy metal ash bucket from next to the stove and dumped most of the cooled ash onto the hearth. Then I fed new wood into the fire, opened the stove vents. The flames leapt higher, greedier. From the trunk in the corner, I dragged out the iron chain with the welded crosses. I wrapped it around the bucket, looping it into the coals, letting it sit in the heat. Come on, I muttered, sweat starting to bead at my temples despite the cold. Another hit at the back of the house. This one was followed by the sound of wood cracking. They were focusing their efforts. Louis, I texted him, one hand, the other adjusting the chain in the fire. They're trying the back again. His reply took longer this time. By time, I'm coming. How? I said out loud. Uber? The chain glowed faintly where it touched the hottest coals. Not red hot, but warm enough. Charged with more than just heat. I grabbed a rag from the kitchen drawer, wrapped it around my hand, and pulled the chain out. It radiated warmth through the cloth. The plan that had been forming in the back of my head pushed forward. It was a bad plan, but it was a plan. I slung the rifle over my shoulder, took a deep breath, and moved toward the back hallway. At the last second, I stopped by the study and grabbed a small bottle labeled blessed oil and a handful of saint medallions. Saint Michael, buddy, if you're real, now's the time, I muttered, tucking the medallions into my pocket. The boards around the back door were splintering when I got there. One of the planks we'd nailed across it had cracked down the middle, a jagged line spiderwebbing out from where some massive force had hit it. I could hear the breathing again, heavy, multiple chests heaving and sink. One more hit and that door would go. I pressed the back of my head lightly against the wall, closed my eyes for a second, and pictured the layout outside. Back porch, 3 steps down, mud, open ground for 10 yards, then the shadow of the barn. They'd be clustered near the door, focusing their strength. Okay, I whispered, we're gonna make you not want this house so bad. I slathered a streak of blessed oil on the chain with quick, clumsy fingers. It glistened faintly in the dim light. Then I did the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I unlocked the back door. Only halfway, just enough to whisper through the crack. "Hey," I said, voice shaking but loud. "You want me? Come get me." The breathing paused. I kicked the door open and threw the hot iron chain into the dark toward the cluster of shapes. I could feel more than see. It hit something with a sound like sizzling meat. The reaction was instant. A roar, multiple roars, exploded around me, a chorus of fury and pain. Shadows surged backward. I caught a flash of fur, of long snout, of a hand that wasn't a hand, fingers too long, tipped with black claws. The smell of burnt hair and something foul hit me like a wall. I slammed the door shut again and threw my weight against it as something hit it from the outside. Not with focused force this time, but in blind, flailing panic. I heard the chain whipping around, clattering against wood and whatever flesh it had latched onto. I grabbed the rifle and fired 2 shots through the upper panel, at an angle that wouldn't hit the chain but would definitely discourage anything pressing too close. The roars turned into snarls, then into an unearthly keening that scraped along my spine. I shoved the heavy kitchen table toward the door with my shoulder, jamming it up against the frame. For a terrifying moment, I thought they'd redouble their efforts, that anger would override pain and fear. Instead, the pressure on the door eased. The breathing moved away. Heavy steps stumbled down the porch, into the yard, then broke into a loping run. Through the shattered section of the door, I saw 3 dark forms tearing across the field, limbs too long, backs hunched, moving on 2 legs, then dropping to 4 when they wanted speed. One of them glowed faintly around the shoulder with a weird dim shimmer, like heat haze on a highway. The iron chain swung from it, still burning with whatever charge we'd given it. They let out one last howl as they reached the edge of the property. It ended in a yelp. A flash of light flared between the trees. For a heartbeat, I saw a shape, a lean human outline wielding something that glinted in the dim. Then the light went out and the howls cut short. The night slammed closed around the house again. I stood there, chest heaving, rifle barrel still warm, ears straining for any sound. For the first time since they started, the silence felt not friendly, never that, but less hungry. My phone buzzed. "Nice throw. Come on out when it's light. I'll show you what's left." I slid down the wall to the floor, back against the door, and laughed once. A sharp, disbelieving bark that felt half hysterical. "Yeah," I texted back with clumsy fingers. "Breakfast first." Dawn came slow and gray. Every muscle in my body hurt. My shoulder was a knot of pain from the rifle recoil. My hands were raw where the rag hadn't fully protected them from the heated chain. But I was alive. The house still stood, and the presence, the suffocating attention I'd felt pressing against the walls, was gone. Not entirely, not permanently, but pushed back. Outside, the yard looked like a battlefield. Deep claw marks gouged the porch. The muddy ground was torn up where heavy bodies had stumbled and scrambled. The smell of burnt fur lingered faintly, mixed with cordite and damp earth. The chain lay a few yards out, half buried in the mud, still slick with something dark and viscous that wasn't quite blood as I knew it. The crosses welded into it were blackened, edges warped slightly. I didn't touch it. Louis pulled up not long after, looking like 3 miles of bad road. There were scratches on his neck, a rip in his shirt, and dried blood on his left sleeve. "You look like hell," I said. "Feel worse," he replied. "You?" "Ditto." We shook hands, and that simple human contact felt almost as holy as anything in the trunk. We walked the perimeter of the house slowly, taking in the damage, nodding to himself. "You did all right," he said. "Could have gone a lot worse. That throw of yours saved us both some trouble." "What about you?" I asked. "You said you had one in a trap." "Had two," he said. "One got loose before I could finish the job. That's the one you lit up. The others came running to help him. That's the thing about a pack. They'll eat you alive, but they'll fight for each other too. Gives you a narrow window to ruin all their days at once." "And did you?" I asked. He shrugged. "Hurt them," he said. "Bad enough they'll be licking their wounds a long time. Might not come this close again in our lifetimes. Or they might. Curses got long memories." We went out to the edge of the property, where the tree line began. There, half slumped against the tree, was one of them, or what was left. It wasn't fully shifted anymore. One leg was human, the other twisted, bent halfway between man and beast. The torso was broad, patches of black fur sprouting from otherwise bare skin. The head was wrong, the jaw elongated but not fully, teeth too long for the shortened muzzle, eyes stuck between colors. It was like watching a frozen glitch halfway through a transformation. It wore the tatters of a shirt I recognized. I'd seen it on a man at the bar the week before. A local who'd glared at me when I mentioned inheriting the farm, then looked away. "Jax," Louis said quietly. "Damn fool." There were iron spikes driven through his limbs, pinning him to the tree. Symbols burned into the bark around him, dark and faintly oily. His chest didn't move. His eyes stared at nothing. "He dead?" I asked. "As dead as they get," Louis said. I swallowed. "You said you can't kill them," I reminded him. "I said you can't kill the curse," he corrected. "The man? You can absolutely kill the man, and sometimes that's close enough for a while." We stood there in silence for a minute. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel heroic. I felt tired, sick, sad in a way I couldn't put words to. "This gonna bring trouble?" I asked finally. "Him being from town?" Louis sighed. "Maybe," he said, "but not the kind we can't handle. Folks will say he got drunk and wandered off. Maybe fell in the swamp. Strangers disappear all the time, especially the ones who go poking at things that don't want poking." He looked at me. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked. The question hung there, like a weight I didn't want to pick up. I thought about my old life, the noise, the grind, the feeling of being slowly shaved down by a job that didn't care if I lived or died. Then I thought about this farm, the study with its journals and rules and desperate attempts at leaving breadcrumbs. The quiet that was starting to feel less like a threat and more like company. The way the fields looked in the rare moments when the clouds broke and the lights slanted in just right. I thought about the fact that if I left, someone else would get this land someday, someone who might not find the journals, someone who might open the door at midnight because they thought they recognized the voice. No, I said finally. I'm staying. Louis nodded, like he'd expected that. Then you keep reading, he said. You learn every trick that old man wrote down. You add your own, and you remember this. You're not alone out here. You hear something, you call. You see something, you call. You start feeling like opening doors that shouldn't be opened, you definitely call. I managed a rough laugh. Yeah, I said, you got it. So that's it. That's how I ended up living on a haunted farm in rural Louisiana, playing reluctant landlord to a patch of land shared with ancient pissed off monsters. The Rougarou hasn't come as close since that night. I still hear him sometimes, howls out in the swamp when the moon's bright, or when the wind's just right. Sometimes when the rain's really coming down and the house creaks in a certain way. I hear my name whispered at the edge of it. But he doesn't circle the house anymore. He doesn't knock. Sometimes, on bad nights, I feel eyes in the tree line, same yellow-red gleam as that first glimpse, watching, waiting, remembering the iron and the fire and the man who threw them. I make sure the fire is always ready. I make sure the nails are checked, the thresholds freshened, the medallions in place. I've added a few rules of my own to Brozzard's list, stuff I learned the hard way, or from Lewis, or from the way the world goes quiet sometimes when you say certain names. And they treat this place like what it is, not a peaceful country escape, but a border, a line between what belongs to us and what doesn't. You asked me once why I don't move back to Texas, why I don't sell the place, cut the losses, go crash on some friend's couch and start over. Here's the thing. I think places like this need someone stubborn and stupid enough to stay. Someone to remember the rules. Someone to keep the journals up to date and the nails freshly driven. Because if everyone leaves, the line moves. And the things on the other side, they like that. So yeah, when people talk about moving to the country, getting away from it all, I don't tell them all this. I just smile and say, make sure you know the rules of the land you're moving onto. But why? You asked why I don't like opening the door after dark, even when you knock. Why I tell you to text me when you pull up instead. Now you know. If you ever come visit, and I'm not saying you should, but if you do, and you stay the night, and you wake up around midnight hearing someone out on the porch, calling your name in a voice that sounds like a little too much like someone you miss, do me a favor. Do us both a favor. Remember rule number 1, and don't open that door.